expecting a special calling guest and also some news that I recently learned. So you are going to be in suspense for a moment. So in the meanwhile, while we await, the calling guest should be calling in about 8:30. And in the meanwhile, it's kind of a baby. So tomorrow, Wednesday, the 29th, is the food fair on the Sister Island, St. Thomas, Rock City. And then Thursday is the Jubei. Friday is the Children's Parade. And Saturday is the Adults Parade. So for all of you who are going to Carnival in Rock City, I'm wishing you a safe and blissful Carnival. As I said, this is a 1 hour radio talk show. This is yours truly, Verdell Peterson. I try to make sure you're well informed of current events. Topics that I usually avoid are political ideologies. I am not interested so much about your thoughts and ideas about the politics in the Virgin Islands. I am more about the process and encouraging everybody to participate in the election process and focus on the laws that govern us. We're under the US flag. This is an unincorporated territory of the United States. We don't have our own constitution. We're governed by a de facto constitution known as the Revised Organic Act of 1954. We also have the Virgin Islands Code. So I focus on the election laws and not necessarily the politics. I also avoid religion, conspiracy theories, mythologies, and personal experiences, personality conflicts. Not get into that. Everybody is entitled to his or her opinion, views, beliefs, theories, ideas, fantasies, and even delusions. But no one is entitled to his or her own facts. So we try to get the facts. But of course, you are entitled. And I hope you could share your thoughts about this show. The guest will be a call-in guest, and you're invited to share your comments on the WSTX Facebook page. If you have any inquiries for the guests, I will hopefully try to get back the information, questions to the guest. As you know, this is an election cycle. There is going to be a primary election. We're going to get into all that as the guest arrives, and not here in the studio, but the guest will appear via telephone. So I hope you're going to listen and take notes, because we all need to have the correct information. There are lots of things on Facebook. My guest is the best person, in my opinion, that can tell us the information pertaining to this election cycle. I'm expecting the supervisor of elections to call in. Dr. Carolyn Fox. And it's very important for you to listen, pay attention, because at this moment I am looking at Facebook and other social media and seeing erroneous information posted and sometimes defamatory statements by members of the Board of Elections. We are going to get into Act 8690, also the deadlines for certain events to take place and dates of primary election and general election. So I hope everyone who is eligible to register to vote has already done so. If not, you have an opportunity to go and register to vote, which I urge you to. That's very important. We have a lot of issues, but I am hoping this election cycle will be as free as possible of conundrums, conspiracy theories, and confusion. I am going to tell you in advance some of the questions that I have prepared that I will ask the supervisor of elections. One, I would like to know what are the duties of the supervisor of elections. We're talking about the position, not the person, because that person who is currently serving is not always going to be in that position. The law does not change unless the law is amended or repealed by the lawmakers. So we're talking about presently what the election laws are and the duties of the supervisor of elections are there that can be read. Reading is critical. Reading is fundamental. I suggest everybody get familiar with 5 documents, not necessarily in this order of priority. I think they are very important. The U.S. Constitution. I walk with my copy of the U.S. Constitution. It's not applicable to us in its entirety. However, the 14th Amendment is applicable to anyone born or naturalized in the United States. Well, the Virgin Islands of the United States is part of the United States. Listen carefully to the official name of this unincorporated territory. According to the Revised Organic Act, the official title is the Virgin Islands of the United States. Hence, the 14th Amendment is applicable to us who are residing here in the U.S. Virgin Islands. That's the unofficial name. Most people call the islands the U.S. Virgin Islands or the United States Virgin Islands. The same name. One is formal and official, and one is what is commonly referred to as the U.S. Virgin Islands. These are British Virgin Islands, but this is the U.S. Virgin Islands. So it's important that you be familiar with the U.S. Constitution, the Revised Organic Act of 1954, which governs us, the Virgin Islands Code, that's 3, the Public Law 94-584, that's a law enacted by Congress that authorizes the U.S. Virgin Islands to draft its own constitution. So right now, it's a de facto constitution. It is temporary. It's going to remain in place until it is replaced by our own constitution, which the people of the U.S. Virgin Islands, the electorate specifically, will have to ratify before it is in effect. So presently, we don't have a constitution. We're being governed by the Revised Organic Act of 1954, which is the constitution currently in place by Congress. We cannot amend that. And hence, I encourage everybody to be familiar with that. Also, be familiar with the public law, because we do have the power to draft our own constitution, but it's going to take all of us. All of us need to be part of this conversation, this narrative in getting a constitution that we, the people, adapt ourselves and ratify. So we'll see what happens with that. There's also the Treaty of Cession that involves the sales purchase of these islands, formerly known as the Danish West Indies, by the United States for $25 million in gold from Denmark. So those 5 documents, be familiar with. They have an impact on our lives. And we, however, have the ability to shape the destiny of the U.S. Virgin Islands. So once again, the U.S. Constitution, the Virgin Islands Code, the Revised Organic Act of 1954, Public Law 94-584, and the Treaty of Cession, and any other relevant documents pertaining to how we are governed here in the U.S. Virgin Islands. Now, at this time, it's now 8:30. I'm expecting the supervisor of elections to call in. I'm waiting, so let me just continue. Okay, let's see. No, not getting that call yet. Well, let's see what happens. I'm expecting the supervisor of elections to call in, Dr. Carolyn Fox. But anyway, I would like to know from the supervisor of elections, what are the duties for that position? And is her role and responsibilities overlapping or in conflict with the role and responsibilities of the Board of Elections? She doesn't speak on behalf of the Board of Elections, so any questions pertaining to the Board of Elections, I would prefer for the information to come from a board member. So the questions I'm asking pertain to her role and responsibilities, as I understand them to be, based on the election laws in Title 18 of the Virgin Islands Code. So how my understanding is the supervisor of elections certifies the election results. It was different in the past, but Act 8690 was passed, and that meant there was a shift in the duties. It used to be the Board of Elections certifying the election results. Now it's the supervisor of elections. I don't know, it may be confusing to some people, but as I said, reading is fundamental. You can read Act 8690, get a copy and scrutinize it for yourself. I will also like for the supervisor to clarify the eligibility requirements to run for delegate to House of Representatives, since the language is somewhat vague. You must be an inhabitant to be eligible to run, not become one. You don't become, you must be. At the time of election, you must be an inhabitant of the U.S. Virgin Islands if you're running to be delegate to House of Representatives from the Virgin Islands. So I want to clarify that because there seem to be some misunderstanding of what's an inhabitant and how does one become an inhabitant. Do you have to be here for a certain length of time? What documents are you required to provide to the Board of Elections and the Office of the Supervisor? Who receives these documents? How does it work? What exactly is the role and responsibilities of the Office of the Supervisor of Elections? We have the Virgin Islands election system. You have a supervisor who is the official election officer that certifies the elections, certifies the nominees. So any questions you have pertaining to nomination papers, certification of candidates, and so forth, those questions could be directed to the Supervisor of Elections office. It's in Sunny Isles and St. Croix. That's where you also go to register to vote. The office is back in its original location. Anyone interested in going to go register to vote? You also could get, I believe, you can register online. These questions, as I said, should be directed to the Supervisor of Elections. There is a website for this office. It's known as vivote.gov, and we hopeful that everyone go get the correct information. Also, there's some announcement, and I'm still waiting for the call. I don't know what happened here. I was expecting the call at 8:30. let me continue then. You can register to vote. I urge everyone. Please do not let anybody discourage you from voting. Your vote is your voice, and your voice is your vote. It's your choice, whomever you wish to vote for. Your vote is confidential. Nobody should be allowed to handle your ballot except you. Be familiar with use of the voting machine. You do have a choice. When you go to the polls, you do have a choice. You can choose to mark directly on your ballot, or you can choose to use a machine, a touchscreen machine. There are demonstrations. You can go to the election office for more information, demonstration of the machines, but you have a choice. You have a choice not to vote also. That's your prerogative, that's your right, if you choose not to participate in the process. But in my opinion, you are relinquishing your rights and privileges. You are failing to perform your civic duty. Not voting is a surrender. As I said, your voice is your vote, and your vote is your voice. If none of the names on the ballot is your choice, you can still mark in somebody's name, not your own name in. It sends a message, at least it will be counted. Your voice or your vote will not be counted unless you cast a ballot. When you want your voice to be counted, I would hope so. But nonetheless, it's your choice if you wish to go to the polls and just simply mark it. Okay, well, I think I'm getting a call now. Let's see. Good morning.
Hi, good morning, Ms. Peterson. How are you?
Good morning. I am excellent now that I'm hearing from you.
Very good.
Well, let me introduce you. I have said that we expected you to come in. The supervisor of elections, Dr. Carolyn Fox, is now on the line. And those of you who are listening, as I said, this show streams live on Facebook. You have an opportunity to give your input on the WSTX Facebook page. You can put in your inquiries, and I'm sure we'll come back and address whatever concern, because I would like to have the supervisor here again before a primary election takes place so that everybody could be straight. We're hearing a lot of rumors, misinformation, propaganda, and sometimes defamatory statements on social media. So I believe everyone should have the opportunity to actually hear from the supervisor of elections and find out the accurate information and dispel the myths, because we know how politics could be. It could get really crazy this election season, but we want to have the right information. And my mission and passion is to educate, enlighten, and inspire minds. So welcome, Supervisor
Good
Fox.
morning, Ms. Peterson, to you and your listener audience. Thank you for this opportunity. I know you have been reaching out to me for a couple of months now, and I'm happy to be able to call into your show today and give the highlights to the upcoming election season and answer any questions you may have and further discussion. So first, I'll start with a little tap. It's good morning. It's a new day. Pour yourself some peace. Sip a little hope. And let gratitude warm your heart. So have your bush tea.
That's nice.
So what I would like to share in the beginning is the election calendar and kind of statistics of where we are, and then I'll open up for some of your questions that you may have. So everybody know the election calendar has been published and it has also been revised. The latest version will be the March version that you'll see on the website or available as copies in our office. We are now in May, and everyone knows what's going on. The nomination petition packages are available for pickup until the 19th. Once you could get them in before 6 o'clock on the 19th, it's fine.
Okay.
So the first day for nomination petitions to be filed with the office after 12 p.m. to 6 p.m. is the 12th of May. 12th of May, and that's by code. Every section of the code is annotated on the calendar as a reference, so you can look it up for yourself. The 12th of May, so folks think it may be far away, but it'll be sooner than you think and quicker than you think. And as we stated before, many persons, aspirants may pick up, but they may not file. So you will wait until the 19th of May to know who all filed their nomination petition. And that's the last day, and it must be filed by 6 p.m. So we will caution folks, try to get it in earlier than 6, because 6 p.m. is as per the clock in the elections office. Not your personal clock, not that I was downstairs in a hallway in a line.
Not Crucian time.
It's stamped, and 601 wouldn't come. You'll take it, but you wouldn't be able to run for office. So the word to the wise, turn green. Anything could happen on the last minute. Again, you don't have to be the one turning it in. If you have a family member or a friend or whomever, they can turn your petition or paper in for you. So make sure you get them in early. May 24th is the deadline for anyone who wants to withdraw. Again, it's a Sunday, so knowing that they're coming the Monday or the Friday before, because we will not be open on that Sunday. Then the next deadline, the 24th of May, deadline for candidates with the same office with similar last names. You got to request in writing with the information to tell us what you want printed next to your name, so that people could differentiate the two persons different. Again, that's a holiday. We never really have any problem with this, so hopefully this election may not be the same. It'll be the same. Then you got the May 29th, the deadline for filing substitute nomination certificates and papers. Again, that's 12 noon, and the reference is there. 29th of May is a Friday. And why 12 o'clock? It's because then you'll be getting ready to cast lots on the 29th of May for those involved in a primary election. Casting of lots is for those involved in a primary election. So folks think because the election is August, so we have a lot of time, etc. No, you need to follow the calendar. May 29th, casting of lots to appear on the primary election ballot. So I'll stop with May for now, and information is available in the calendar. We also have it on the website. We're working right now on the update to send to the legislature, so they also could run it on the legislative channel. So we try to put the information out all various mediums that we have, so everyone could be informed. Of course, you can visit our website, www.vivote.gov. And if you have any questions, you can visit our office or you can call in to the office. In addition to that, we did put out a press release, and it's going to be run again a couple of days until the 19th in Spanish and English. It's a clarification and enforcement notice about the inactive voters and nomination petition and papers. Again, as we mentioned as for the code, inactive voters, they remain eligible to vote, but they're not eligible to sign the nomination petition, no paper. And that's why we encourage everyone to get more signatures than you need. So you get more signatures than you not sure and they didn't tell you the truth. So they have you sign, you have them sign. So we encourage you, if it says 50, get 75. If it says 100, get 125, or whatever you want to get. But you need to get more than required. Again, if you have any issues with signatures on your nomination petition or paper, we will let you know, and you have 3 days to cure it. So it's not like one and done. If you have an error on there or something, we'll give you 3 days to rectify that. If not, then you'll be getting a notice of disqualification. So the press release is out. It'll be running in Spanish and English. But again, for the nomination petition and paper, inactive voters do not count. You can have persons look up the information to find out if they're active or not on our website, or call the office and check, come into the office and check. But again, you have the opportunity to look it up. On our website, there's lots of information. We have a lot of statistical reports that we started to upload last year. So you could look at the information and see where persons are strong, which voting center or polling place you were strong in when you run the last time. And you could kind of see where you need to work at your strategic person or whomever you have as your campaign persons can look at this data and look at strategy or how you want to run your campaign and your election in the upcoming elections. Quick, next I'll go over the numbers of persons that are active and inactive. So for the active voters in St. Croix, we have 14,266, and that's as of April 14th. On St. John, we have 1,152. On St. Thomas, we have 13,174. That gives you a total of 28,592 registered active voters. Then you go to the inactive voters. So on St. Croix, we have 12,746 inactive voters.
Repeat that.
And 12,740.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, and like I said, these reports are available on our website. Every month we put up various reports. And then St. John, 1,217. And I'll come back to comparing when I'm done. And then St. Thomas, 13,528. For a total of 27,491. So if you look at that, like you said, it's a lot. It is a lot. Because if you look at St. John as an example, they have more inactive voters than voters. 1,217, and they got 1,152 that's active. And so it's the same. So you got nearly 27,000 inactive, you have 28,000 active. So 50-50. So that gives us the 50-something thousand that we have on our books as registered voters, but they are not active. Person want to know, do we get information about that? Sure we do. Quarterly reports from the Department of Health. But of course, if someone died elsewhere, we do not get that information. So we have a form where we utilize it where a family member can sign the form, notarize it saying that John Doe, my uncle, father, whatever, passed away. But if we don't get an official document, we cannot take that person off our rolls. And even though we take persons off with death, etc., they're still in our database. So we could always go back and find them and look that information up. But again, we have to use official source to take anyone off the registration, voter registration files. Right now, you can register in person to vote or online. So look at our website. You can go on our website and register to vote online. Of course, it has a lot of drop down. It has a lot of things in place that you can't be resident of some place else and trying to register here. So there's requirements that you have to put in, and if you don't meet those requirements and parameters, it doesn't let you go any further. So no one can just say register and they're not really resident or living here. So that's the two options that you have, in person or online. And again, before I go further, I just want to thank the staff of the election system. Again, this is our exciting time of the year, because in the half year, we are preparing for an election. Folks like to ask what we do all year. election. We're supposed to be able to do an election at any notice. It could be a special election, call at any time. So we have to always be prepared. So that's what we do. We get our equipment maintained. Last year, we had the people from, not last year, last month, earlier this month, April. We had a maintenance team came down from internet and they maintain all our equipment. Every election year, they have to come and maintain and for our contract. So they service the equipment, whatever issues we had, some of them kiosks was messed up with transportation back and forth. There are no kiosks, stick them to us prior to August. So our equipment are tested, they are maintained, the staff is ready. Again, the same small staff that we have, but we're super staffed. And board members, we thank them for their participation also, and the public and all the government agencies that we have to work with, because we do a lot of work with various agencies, government and non-government. So we want to say thank you, getting ready for this exciting year and getting information out. We thank the media that we work with, everyone. We're running some PSAs, we're running some ads, the radio station, they work with us, they collaborate with us. So we thank you, we thank you.
Excellent. So if a person registers today, that person is placed on the active list, and can that person sign a nomination petition?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, they can.
But if a person hasn't participated in 2 last consecutive general election, they become on the inactive status, right?
That's correct.
Okay. And as you said, nomination papers have to be, the last days is May 19th. So can the nominations papers be picked up or in May? Is there a deadline to pick up?
No, there's no deadline to pick up. The deadline, some persons can pick up on the 19th, the last day.
Right.
You can pick up in the morning and you can get 50, 75 signatures in that one day. Once you get it back to us by 6. But most persons don't wait that late, but you can. But you could pick up anytime until May 19th and get it back in by 6 o'clock on May 9th. The first day you can bring them into our office, May 12th. And once we start getting them, then we start checking them for qualifications. So that's May 12th. Another reason why persons bring them in early or try to get early, the earlier you file based on when you picked up is how you cast the last.
Okay.
So early birds get the one, right? So if you put in last, you're going to pick last. You know, if you bring your stuff back after, you're going to pick last. So this is how the casting of last is done by those who filed early.
And anybody can pick up nomination papers?
Yes, once you come to pick up for someone, you can pick up for someone or you can pick up for yourself. So if you come in and you say, I'm picking up for John Doe, we have to check John Doe party registration affiliation, and that's the package you get. If you belong to a political party, you get petitions. If it belongs to a non-party or independent, no party or independent, you get a paper. So that's why the terms are different, and each one have different information in there. Again, the independents of the new party, they're required to get 100 signatures. Everyone in the party are only authorized to get 50 signatures to be able to be nominated.
And I know in some cases it's very specific about your eligibility requirement. For example, for delegate to House of Representatives, you can't be running for any other offices. But I'm wondering, for Board of Elections, is there any restriction for the boards to run for another public office? Okay, I'm not sure if I've never seen this scenario, but you always have to anticipate, because sometimes the election laws could be ambiguous unless it's very precise language. In other words, I'm asking can somebody say, I'm going to run for Board of Education, and I'm also going to run for Board of Elections. Is that prohibited?
If you're running in the same election cycle, some positions you cannot run for two public office and the position.
Okay.
And the same ballot. But we had a couple of years ago, since Michael Springer, he was running for senator and the Constitutional Convention.
Right.
That was authorized because it's not two public office. So we got the latter right now that's on the board. She runs for the board and she runs for the Constitutional Convention. So since that's not a public office, you could run for both. Okay. Now, in Springer's case, if he had one of them or both of them, he would have had to choose which one he wants to serve in, right? Because he can't serve as a senator and then serve as the Constitutional Convention. So he would have to choose which one he wants. Other than that, it's not the same cycle, so they can run for the office. If you're presently a board member and running for office, you have to resign that position to run for that public office. But if you're off and you next election cycle, you can run for the Board of Education. You just can't be an employee of the board, run for the board. You can't be an employee of the election to run for the election.
And since your tenure has begun, what are some of the corrective measures that have taken place? Because I know in the past, we've had the situation where there was two separate boards. There was the St. Croix board and St. Thomas, St. John District Board of Elections. Now it's a joint board, and some of the election laws that pre-existed have been amended, what is known as Act 8690. And I see so many different misleading information from board members and social media. So I think there needs to be some clarity. So could you elaborate on what are some of the changes to the election laws since you came on board?
Okay, so we start with that one, Act 8690. Act 8690 is very clear for legal minds and myself. So the Office of the Supervisor was established by Act 936 in February 1963. And there have been some changes and modifications along the way. It's also mentioned, one of the few positions that's mentioned in the Organic Act in Section 12 of the initiative. What happened over the years, board members and staff has traveled, look at what's happened nationally and within the territories. And they began to look at some election reform. Election reform goes on election cycle and non-election cycle. Board members that was on the board back then, like Bob Bryan, Miss Wells, Belado, Williams, Lisa Moorhead, Molina, Ivy Moses, just to name a few, Hendricks, met. We had 4 sessions, 2 held at Buccaneer, 2 held at Walkers by the Sea. They met with Senators Gittin, O'Reilly, and Francis, along with the deputies and the supervisor. Those changes that are in Act 8690 happened back then. They were promoted by board members, not Ms. Fox, not the supervisor of the election. And even if you look at the 60th anniversary ceremony that was held in Government House, former Supervisor Abramson lauded this amendment because he too tried to get this enacted years prior. What 8690 did is it aligned the duties and responsibility under the supervisor of election that was under the Board of Election. I'll back up 1 minute. Laws are enacted throughout. The last law enacted is the last law you follow, right? That's legal. So no matter what you say, that's confusing. It's just that's the way it is. They don't have to even repeal certain laws. Once you enact another law, it's automatically repealed. But
yeah, I understand.
Still want to hold on to the past.
Yeah.
The election administrator, the highest official position in the territory or the nation, is the election official.
Yeah.
No matter the title, because I'm called a supervisor, people think it's less than. I'm equivalent to Board is Secretary of State. It's not the name, it's the position and the duties and responsibilities.
So it's the same responsibility.
If board members were in charge of elections, there would have been 55 boards in every state and territory. That's number one. Number two, the board members go through the same election process as all the other aspirants. So if they're in charge and they're going through the process, that's a conflict of interest.
I agree.
That's why those positions and duties are under the office of the supervisor. And we need to stop looking at the person and look at the position and the professionalism of the position. You know, the worry because I say supervisor, that's being taken care of down the road with the organic acquisition. It's because they think you're a supervisor, you're less than. Even when you have to deal with somebody commissioner and they think that you're less than. I'm equivalent to them. It's not the title, it's the position and what you do. So that's what happens. So they took a lot of the information from section 47 that's under the board and placed it under the office of the supervisor. Again, I tell you, I was at the meeting, and that was shared with these new board members that came on board. You know, they may want to undo whatever was done, that's up to them, but I knew that was done by them. So when I went to the legislature to testify on a bill that was already submitted, I didn't go to the legislature to create this bill. This was already a bill with numerous other sections in 8690, not only pertaining to elections, right? So that was what it is. So I have to go and say whether I agree with it or not. That's my position. That's what I do when I go to the legislature. You agree or disagree. The board does the same thing. But the board don't go and testify. The board are elected members. Some of them have other jobs. They don't know election in detail day to day like I should and the staff should, right? That's our job full-time 24/7. So we have to learn the laws, get the updates, recommending to the board. The board is policy-making body. Somebody have a challenge, instead of having to go to court, they go to the board. Because if the board was involved, then you have to go to the court. And so those are the reasons why the law was changed. It was promoted by board members. I have to carry it out, you know, and I don't mind the call my name, but I know what happened. The history is there. The stenographer report was given to these new board members, and they've been talking about this for the last year or year and a half, you know, and the law will tell them already. The legislature is not going to change it, no matter how long they speak. We're in an election year right now. You think anybody touching any laws right now? I don't think so. You know, so I'm saying again, instead of we look forward to start doing election work, that's important for election year, we're still trying to repeat or we go back to 2022. This bill was passed in 2022. So that's all I have to say on that. I'm looking forward. I'm here preparing for a successful election. I know there's a lot of people out there talking about, a lot of people running. If you look back in history, in a gubernatorial year, a lot of people always run. So for us, whether one person runs or 200 persons run, we have to prepare the same, right? So if you look back at our records in 2018, it was the same number of persons trying to run. We had like 3-4 Democratic persons going through the primary before they get to the general, you know, for governor position. This is nothing new. So the history is there. It's always more participation during a gubernatorial year. We just got to make sure that we do what we're supposed to do, dot our I's and cross our T's. And that's what we try to do. Follow the law. That's all I know to do. Yes, sometimes we may have misinterpretation. You have to go to the court. But that's part of the process. You know, everybody keeps saying, it's facts that I was in court. This man being in court more than me. But what happened? They didn't have documentation and the systems that you have now so you could know what's going on every day. But all positions... And
they didn't have a website then.
Exactly. And they have technology so that you could do this thing. Mr. Abramson had to go to court numerous times also. But no, they want to think that we're going to court now more than ever. It's part of the process. You look at it happening in the States. They in court the same thing every month with all kinds of different challenges. So that's the job. The last need to be clarified and updated. And I mentioned that from 2014. You know, this is nothing new. We mentioned that the laws need to be updated. They're ambiguous. Sometimes they change one section of the code and they don't change the other section. And we provide this information to them for years. But again, the legislature only do some cosmetic amendments or amendments that's not going to impact them this year. They put it up for next year and then nothing gets done. I could bring up a good example again. From 2022 I told them about the felon running for these offices, right? Delegate and governor.
Right.
One has that law.
I am aware. I mentioned it on my last show.
I talked about it in 2022. Here we are in 2026, and it's still not done. So we had Picard that did it, and now we have McClafferty that may be doing it. He pick up for the delegate to Congress race because they know that you can't touch them, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm saying that's how it happened with legislative amendments, repeal, or writing that law. It takes time, and they look at it at their schedule. They have to go through legal review, then they have to bring it to the committee, then they have to get it to the full body. But in the meantime, you know, we're getting closer to the time when they can't amend any election laws, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we go through this cycle all the time. But from 2022, this is 4 years later, another election cycle, and we still haven't amended that law.
What is the window of opportunity to amend a law prior to an election? How much time you?
Yeah, 6 months prior to the general election, which puts you in May.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the general election is in
November 3rd.
November 3rd. So right now there cannot be any amendment to the election law, right?
Correct, and this is something very important or something legal. It's something not going to impact elections or the public. Because whatever laws they change that impact the public, we have to notify the public. You know, you have to get information out there. If it changes something, then we have to send out letters to the voters. So it depends on what it is. If it's nothing that impacts the election specifically, then, you know, they do have way they could say notwithstanding, right, to change the law. So they can do that as a legislation.
That's why it's important for you to come to the public and explain and leave all the politics out and just focus on the process, because you have to go by what's written. It's the same thing with the U.S. Constitution. Some people say, "Oh, see, we were 3/5 or whatever the fraction is of a human being," but what they don't understand is you have the amendments, like you have the 14th Amendment, and the U.S. Constitution doesn't change. It's still in the original form, but you have, like you said, you have to go by the existing law, and not always have to go through the repeal process. A law doesn't have to be repealed. As long as it's amended, you go by the existing one. I think that needs to really be clear in the minds of people, because we have members of the Board of Elections, like I'm saying, telling people it's in the law. You are allowed to put your paper ballot in a standalone ballot box, because the law wasn't necessarily repealed and removed from the Virginia Code. But as you said, you got to go by the existing one, which replaces the old one. So that definitely needed some clarity there. And the issue now, going back to the eligibility requirements to run for delegate to House of Representatives. In the U.S. Constitution, the word inhabitant is used. In the U.S. Code, I don't know if I have mentioned, yes, one of the important documents, maybe I forget to mention that. I mentioned all the documents people should be familiar with. In the U.S. Code, it says you have to be an inhabitant of the U.S. Virgin Islands to run for delegate of House of Representatives from the U.S. Virgin Islands. But unlike the others, public office, it doesn't give an exact residency time requirement. How do you go about establishing if a candidate is actually an inhabitant?
So there's a checklist that was developed in 2014 that we utilize to determine resident or inhabitant. And again, in Title 1, General Provisions rules of construction, sections 41 to 52. An inhabitant in the Virgin Islands means a resident in any place, right? Resident in this place.
Mm-hmm.
That means they should be paying taxes in the Virgin Islands. So we could check taxes, we check leases, you check fire bill, water bill, etc. Bank accounts, certain things. So these are a list of different things that you can check.
Mm-hmm.
But we usually try taxes, leases, and like I say, water or fire account.
Mm-hmm. So that's like bona fide resident. And but it doesn't say any length of time, but I would assume to be paying income taxes or property taxes, you should be here at least a year. But so, I mean, I'm saying it's creating confusion because of the term inhabitant. So can a person become an inhabitant after a year for the first time living in the U.S. Virgin Islands, and they get a job and they pay property taxes after 1 year, as opposed to, we know for the other public offices, you have to at least, for the senators, 3 years consecutive. So
and that's a legal question I have to ask. But again, usually you actually tax documents, and all those who were challenged before, they provided that documentation, right? So if you have it, you'll show it. If you don't have it, then you can't show it. So that was shown by all those who were challenged in the past, and persons were disqualified in the past for the same law. So
do you feel that there's an overlap between your role and responsibilities and that of the Board of Elections?
Well, that's why they were making a clarification and they moved whatever sections in 47 that was no longer relevant to the board. Because you got to remember in 1963, in the 60s when this law was passed, it was back then. And so a lot of the laws have not been updated. So that's why they're updating and amending some of this law. So the duties that are performed by the office of the supervisor, those were some of the duties that they moved from under 47 of the board to under section 4 of the supervisor. So really, eventually, no law should be overlapping, right? The board is a policy-making body, just like any board out there. Board governance tells you that. You know, if you look at the board governance tells you what board's functions are. And then it tells you what the full-time representative, whether it's CEO, the executive director, etc., etc. Of course, you report to the board. The board is in charge of you. If there's something that telling you to do is legal, moral, and ethical. If they're telling you to do something that's illegal, immoral, or unethical, I have a choice of not doing it. And then end up in court or wherever else, or whatever the consequences may be. Right? Because I'm not going to do anything that's illegal, immoral, or unethical. And that's just me growing up from young age, not this job, not the military, maybe that. That's just the way I am. I follow the laws to the best of my ability. So that's it.
And I think you're doing an excellent job. And I'm happy that you're here today. I know it's never enough time to go through it, everything I wish clarified. However, I know there's some exciting news. I'm excited to hear the news. Could you tell us about your recent election to a national commission?
Oh, okay. Thank you for that. Thank you again. Yes,
and congratulations.
Thank you. Ms. Douglas and I attended the Election Assistant Commission meeting in Chicago 2 weeks ago. That's where I was the week when they had a lot going on here. And I was elected the Regional 6 chairperson. That's the first time in history the EAC has broken out into the regions. So I represent the 5 territories: Puerto Rico, Guam, Mariana Islands, Saipan, America Samoa, and U.S. Virgin Islands. And that term is a 2-year term. And so I'm excited. Ms. Douglas attended our first conference and member of the Standards Board, so she also got a certificate as a member of the Election Assistance Commission. So yes, that's a national organization, and I'm humble and honored, not just to represent myself, but to represent the U.S. Virgin Islands and continue to put us on the map. Because a lot of times we attend conferences and we're not even mentioned, we're not even on the map. And so I continue to stress that every conference I've been to in my whole life, I continue to let them know that we are U.S. Virgin Islands and they need to recognize us. They need to do articles about us. They need to have us included in the convention. And we also are looking into doing a convention here in the next 3 to 5 years.
Great.
So
that
we'll
sounds
be doing
good.
a convention here of the Election Assistance Commission.
How was the elections conducted?
Whose election?
How was the election done?
Oh, all the regions, when you break out in the regions, they had to select that person. So they elected the person.
So each member of this
region, yes.
They submitted a ballot.
It was voice vote, right?
It was by a voice vote?
Correct.
And how many candidates were seeking the position?
Well, all 5 of us are eligible. So it was 5 eligible and they selected me.
Okay, so it was from the 5.
Right, so
they took a vote.
Each region is region 1 to region 6.
And the U.S. Virgin Islands Supervisor of Elections received the highest vote.
That's correct. And Saipan is the vice chair.
I mean, that's how it works. It's by popular votes, I think. So I'm telling people, the more you come out and participate, that's a greater form of expressing democracy, because it's a government for the people, by the people, and of the people. So these 5 unincorporated territories, the top election official have what title?
So in Puerto Rico, they kind of commission. They run the kind of commission. In Guam, is the executive director of election. Saipan is the same, and America Samoa. And so they all have executive director. None is a supervisor of election. None.
Do they all have an election board or election commission?
I only have one having with 2. Puerto Rico has a commission, but they are appointed, and they usually with some people's judges. Guam has a board, but everybody say our board is the largest. They don't have 14 members. Rather, they have 7, 8 of them.
We have a unique situation when I compare the states and the 5 unincorporated territories. First of all, most of the state have the position title as Secretary of State, and not all have an election board or a commission.
That's correct.
But I think you have clarified. And for further information, as you mentioned, people can go to the election office in person. They can make calls. They can go to the website, www.vivote.gov, and get more information. The last day to register to vote for this election cycle is when?
So the 30 days before, you do the date of the calendar here.
Okay, so before
10 days before the election of August 1st, the books are closed.
All right, because it's a federal law. In every state, you can't put more than 30 days. And I know in some states, you can register to vote the same day of the elections.
That's correct. So they got the technology, they got the manpower, and they got the equipment to do that. So we wouldn't push for that right now because of our systems and what you have to do. You have to upload the system, the database, and send it to Nebraska. So again, they have different voting equipment. They do a lot different. They have their own IT department. So they have bigger election organization compared to our organization. So everything is dealt with differently based on what you have.
Well, I
But
come.
like you said, we went in and thank you again for the time. And I have a quote here that I would like to share as we end. The vote is precious. It is our most sacred. It is the most powerful, non-violent tool we have in our democracy. And that's by John Lewis in 2019.
Thanks. That's a beautiful way to end. And I guess once again, I want to encourage everybody to go register to vote if you haven't done so. And this show is going to is recorded, so people could go to Facebook and they could submit their inquiries, concerns, or whatever. So I want to thank you and all the listeners. Knowledge is power. Live, listen, learn, love, and levitate.